The conversation today started with Jonny has a date, an ice skating date tonight, in which he's taking the ferry to, and he's bringing his own skates. And then they're planning on going out after and doing something after, and he's going to have to carry his skates around. I said, I can't believe you're not going to just rent skates. Everyone in the chat thinks I'm crazy and he should bring his own. I don't know. I guess I'm crazy.
The real question is, Jonny, when you go on your skating day tonight, are you going to bring your creator selfie stick? That's what I want to say.
I actually, it's funny. We were talking about it before, and I was like, I'm just going to have her stand on the side, and I'm just going to rip around and just enjoy myself on the ice. And maybe she'll film some content for me.
That's is it a hero move if you look like you know what you're doing, or no? Like,
she knows what I do for a living. Like, it's not like a surprise.
Right. So because you talk about hockey all day, that therefore you're good at hockey? Is that the
You saw my MetLife highlights, Frank. Come on. You saw the breakaway I had at MetLife. That was nasty. Come on.
Yeah, I don't know. A little bit suspect, Jonny. I mean, in terms of date ideas, I feel like you're lacking in creativity.
Well, this is just for me to break in new skates. It's not really about the date.
We got a comment in the chat from Recon Gamer 420. Petition to ban Jonny from talking anything hockey. So,
but I'm definitely up for Jonny and his date stories, though.
Me too.
What the hell, Recon Gamer 420?
He's not into your hockey takes. He's more into your personal life, I can see. So, all right, Frank, I want to start here with you on a serious note about something that's been floating around that, is a potential, shockwave of the hockey world situation. And that's Elias Pettersson. And it seems like maybe everything is jammed up because of him. Maybe not. Maybe it's hearsay. Maybe it's posturing. What do you have on that whole situation? Because to me, it's really fascinating.
Well, it's fascinating that he's not signed, but what isn't fascinating is the idea that teams are calling about him at this deadline. Like, I can tell you, full stop, period. There is a 0. Do you see this? A 0% chance that Elias Pettersson gets traded during this deadline period. 0. Like, there's not a greater than 1% chance.
Wow.
Why would, what are we talking about here? We're talking about one of the true superstars of the game, a player that, this team partly runs on the back of with Thatcher Demko and Quinn Hughes. Mm-hmm. And not to say nothing of JT Miller, but what? Why was that even a topic in the last 5 days? What are people thinking? How does this even become a thing?
Well, I might know where it started. I was watching the Chicklets vlog from All-Star Weekend, and Rick Tocchet actually says to Ryan Whitney in it, he goes, "Which one of you said Pettersson's going to Chicago? Thanks for that one," or something like that. It was pretty funny, a good little back and forth. But
that was December.
Is he an RFA? Is he an RFA or UFA?
He's an RFA with one more year beyond this one under team control. So then what are we talking about here?
So then can I ask you another question then? Okay. Could you see him in the offseason if they're still at this impasse? Could you see them trading him if he makes it? I mean, because listen, we've now seen this happen with other marquee players. If he says, I'm not signing long term, we're getting this done, or then they're like, okay.
Well, you made a big leap from A to Z, though. And that was if he says he's not signing here. We don't have any evidence that that's the case. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the mystery here is
he's also not going to come out and say that during the season, Frank. Like, what players just say, I don't intend on signing here in the middle of the season?
But maybe he just doesn't intend on signing during the season. Like, see, I think here's my point is let's not jump to conclusions here. I do think it's odd that Pettersson hasn't signed. Mm-hmm. Yes. I think the Canucks have put all their resources on the table and said, this is not about money. You just tell us what you want. Do you want 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, whatever it is? The number probably starts with a 12 in terms of AAV. He's going to be an extremely wealthy individual. So this is not about money. So let's park that part of it. And by the way, I don't think that they put $12 million, 8 times 12 on the table before this season started. I do think that there was a little bit of a game of chicken heading into this year of, hey, you had a 100-point season last year. Can you go out and do it again? And he's certainly on his way there. So my thing is, why, like, because he hasn't signed, we don't know the reason why he hasn't signed. And I do think that there's frustration on the Canucks part that it hasn't gotten done because there's other important pieces of business that they'd like to get done, including, hey, what happens now with Elias Lindholm, who's a pending unrestricted free agent? Do we have the ability to re-sign him? And they also need to get Philip Hronek done on what is very likely to be an expensive extension. There's a lot of things that Vancouver has to accomplish, but we don't know the answer yet as to why he remains unsigned. And until we have even a glimmer of one hint, which we have not received yet, then I don't believe that, that this becomes any bigger than what it is right now, which is not just a lot of talk in a Vancouver market that is combustible.
I'm not trying to make this about something else, but I'm just asking you where this kind of ties in. Does the John Tavares situation kind of now bring fear to management with other teams and how that situation was handled? Or is that just an afterthought? That's a one-off.
Well, it's a totally different scenario. The comparable isn't Tavares, who was an pending unrestricted free agent. The comparable here would be Matthew Tkachuk, where he had one more year left on his deal one more year left as an RFA, went to the Flames that summer and said, hey, I'm not re-signing here long-term. You have to trade me somewhere. Now, the other part of this is, as you know, the Canucks can force the issue here. They have the ability to keep him under team control through arbitration or a qualifying offer. So there's plenty of paths that they can go down to make sure that he's in their lineup next season. He may not love it, but again, we don't have any indication that he doesn't want to be there. So let's not jump to that next stage yet.
So just or Colby, you're gonna go.
No, it's a fair statement. Listen, this is the day of in the life of the internet and the way things spread and wildfires go. So you heard it from our insider that right now a lot of this is just nonsense, and he's not getting moved. So everybody can put that to bed. At this trade deadline, it doesn't matter. It means something can't happen in the summer at the draft or whatever. But for now, he's going to continue to play on this,
this Canucks team that has an authentic shot to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, well, I think they have a shot. Absolutely. I think it would be unfair to say anything else. So, all right, Frank, I want to move east.
So what are you saying? You're not a Canucks?
Yeah. What was that?
Please unpack this so that we can replay this clip in Vancouver.
I'm with you, Frank.
Listen, we've had this conversation on our show a number of times. I think the Vancouver Canucks are having an incredible regular season, but I don't think they're a team that's going to go cruise through the playoffs. I think they're a team that's going to have to learn how to win by losing in the playoffs. I look at the
what
history.
Does that mean? I've heard people say
tell you
that,
exactly
and I know
what it means.
Hold on.
Then
I know
then
what it
the
means.
playoffs.
Meaning, like, teams need to, experience some kind of failure before they can break through and win. But why? Like, why?
That's it. Because it's hard to win in the playoffs. Playoff hockey is different. The commitment levels in areas of the game, like the defensive zone, like blocking shots, like finishing hits, like stopping on pucks and not turning off pucks, like playing through guys on every single shift. The intensity level goes up so many notches. It's not a small jump. Okay. And that's why a lot of teams that are inexperienced in the playoffs and they don't have guys that understand how to gear you up to win in that scenario, the intensity, the feeling in the building. I read a quote yesterday on our show, Frank, and so I'm not going to read it again. I'm just going to paraphrase it. And it's from John Cooper talking about the different phases of the NHL season and what they mean to your team and how they prepare you for the big dance. And games 60 to 82 is where teams learn how to prepare themselves for the playoffs and get themselves into that mentality and that buy-in of who that they need to be in order to be successful. And time again, we see teams run through a regular season and, get into that first round of the playoffs, and the game is very different and it doesn't translate. And then you see them. It happened with Vegas. They knocked on the door a couple of times before they were finally able to bring in the right pieces. Okay, during the regular
they got all the way
season,
to a Stanley Cup final without having a franchise existed the year before.
Did they win?
I understand what you're saying, that most teams don't break through and win. But I'm also thinking about it a little bit differently this year based on the way that the West has broken down. And there's 6 really, really good teams, 2 of them guaranteed to lose in the first round. If the Canucks are able to get that 1 seed, they're going to have the easiest first round matchup in the entire league. Okay.
Well,
wait a second, while the Golden Knights and Oilers slug it out in round 1, then they get the winner of that. And I understand that the Canucks would be probably a bit of an underdog in that scenario. But you mean to tell me that Thatcher Demko can't out goalie Stuart Skinner for a round if that were to be the case?
We'll see. We've never
seen
him in the playoffs. We'll see.
I think the Canucks, we've kind of talked about it a little bit, like back and forth. It'll be similar to the Devils last year, I think, where that first round they'll maybe struggle out of the gate and have to figure out how to play that playoff style. Then they will figure it out. But by the time round 2 comes and they play someone that's experienced in the playoffs, it's going to just be a different animal.
Frank, how many guys on the Vancouver Canucks have a bunch of playoff experience?
Ian Cole has 2 Stanley Cups and went to this would be 9 straight years in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken.
Teddy Bluger won the cup last year.
Teddy Bluger won the cup last year. I'm just trying to think.
Yeah.
Zadorov maybe has a couple games.
JT Miller would have had playoff experience with the Lightning and the Rangers. Correct?
That's really it.
JT Miller would have gotten to a cup final.
What can I ask you? What about Pettersson? What about Hughes? What about Besser? What about the guys that they count on to do all of their damage? What about the guys that carry the water for them? What about Thatcher Demko?
Just the bubble.
I'm just like,
I get what you're saying. I hear people repeat it all the time. I just don't know if it's stone cold fact.
Yeah. Well, outside of Vegas, that first year, like when you really think about the previous Stanley Cup champions, like all of them, had at least been like in the second round, conference final, like years before, knocking on that door.
It took Tampa years to build towards it. To build towards it. It wasn't just the loss.
Even St. Louis, dude. Even St. Louis, that people say they were in last place, like years before, they were still
plenty of evidence.
Washington, they were battling Nashville, they were battling Chicago every year. So you need to learn. And look,
what did the LA Kings do before they won?
I don't remember.
I don't think they did anything.
I don't remember
that one either.
Listen, you can
they won in 2012, and they had the 2 previous years before that. They lost in the first round both times.
And then what did they do? They went out and added Richards and Carter, 2 guys who were dynamite players. They played in a Stanley Cup final for the Flyers in 2010. They go out. I mean, those 2 players were major marquee players at that time. Major marquee players. They moved on from Jack Johnson.
I think there's enough playoff experience. I think they can put it to the test. Remember, those guys did win a round in the bubble. Those core pieces, and then you sprinkle in a Cole, a Miller, all these other guys. Like there's been enough pieces that have been and had some
the bubble though.
What?
Yeah, we count the bubble.
We're counting the bubble toward playoff experience.
Okay, so now are you going to tell the Lightning that their Stanley Cup win?
Yeah, I mean you can't not count the bubble. Whether
that might have been the worst and the hardest playoff to get through.
Yeah, you can't.
No family, no fans, and it was forever long that you're living in a hotel.
Fair. All right, well let's transition because this is all hypothetical anyway. Because we don't know what they're going to do in the playoffs, right? Until it happens.
We also don't know what the Canucks and other teams are going to do between now and then. I still think they're going to trade for at least another piece.
On defense?
Probably.
Who do you think they're going after? Do you have a name in mind?
So. Yeah, I mean, they're all over and have been keeping tabs on the price for Chris Tanev. I reported yesterday that they're looking at Brandon Duhaime and keeping tabs on him from Minnesota. No guarantee that he moves because the Wild are right back in the playoff race, but look, it goes to show you that Vancouver, the most aggressive trading team in the last calendar year that's totally reshaped their roster, they're still fighting to win more, which to me says a lot about what they're thinking and their thought process is. They're not going, I can promise you this, to put a bow on this part of the conversation. They're not going into this playoffs thinking, man, it'd be so good if we just got some experience this time and we can come back next year and then win.
And
that's not what they're thinking.
I'm sure that's what Tampa and Boston were thinking when they had their record years and then they lost in the first round in those 2 years. That's exactly what they were thinking. I mean, come on, Frank. Nobody's thinking that way.
Yeah.
But you're putting a cap on them saying they can't win because they haven't done it before.
He also said Alexis Lafreniere can't get 100 points because he hasn't done it before. That's how Colby thinks.
But Alexis Lafreniere can't get 100 points.
All right, I just wanted to make a joke to end this conversation. Scenario. I wanted to make a joke to end the conversation.
That's like saying I can get down to 200 pounds. Like, yeah, okay.
I believe in you, Frank. I think you can get to 185. But let's move into a different topic because I actually, I don't want to create anything. It's already been created. It was going on yesterday. But the Devils now 5 points back at the Philadelphia Flyers for third in the Metro. They're on a West Coast trip right now for 3 games in Western California. If they don't win at least 2 games on that trip, 2 out of 3, is it too late for Lindy Ruff's job to be in jeopardy this season? Like, are they just going to what's going to happen there? Because we saw.
Is it too late? I mean, I know it was a different manager and a different time, but the Devils fired a coach with 4 games left in their season and won the division that year.
When was that?
Reminder. When was that? 2002 or 4, 3, somewhere in that era. It was the Lou Lamoriello.
That was a Lou Lamoriello move.
Yeah.
Too young for that one.
Yeah, apparently your face was like, what? And let me remind you too, I saw this yesterday, so I'm just looking it up to confirm. But the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2008 had 59 points in 57 games, and they brought in Dan Bylsma. 57 games they played. That's just about right where the Devils are now. They're at 58. And that team went on to win the Stanley Cup.
No, I said yesterday, Frank, that unless there are 2 ways I think, Fitz would be looking at this in New Jersey. And like if he's already identified, let's say a guy like Craig Berube who's sitting out there, or Bruce Boudreau, or whomever it may be, right? If he's identified somebody that he wants, then it's never too late to make a coaching decision. You've also got Travis Green, who, does have head coaching experience, albeit, they didn't exactly have, shining years in Vancouver when he was in charge, but he was very successful at the American League level in Utica, which is why he got that opportunity
by the way, win playoff rounds in Vancouver.
He what?
They did win playoff rounds in Vancouver, exactly what we were just talking about.
Was that the bubble year?
Yes.
Okay. And that's when Demko played in the playoffs, by the way.
So yeah, but that doesn't count, right?
No, I never said that doesn't count.
I'm just kidding.
I don't think the bubble doesn't count. I think those games were great.
They won their qualifying round over the Wild, and then they beat the Blues 4-2 in the first round and lost to Vegas in 7 games.
Okay, so Thatcher Demko does have some playoff experience. So
Travis Green is not on that bench by accident. They wanted someone with experience.
Exactly. So my point being, it's never too late is what I said to him yesterday about this whole coaching situation. But the question for you is this something that Fitz is actually thinking about doing right now? Does ownership have the appetite for another coach? Where do the Devils sit with all this?
Oh, I think he'd have to be thinking about it right now. It's not the fan chants. It's not the comments that Lindy Ruff has made, although what he said last week about the media applying excess pressure to players it feels like that's like the last straw for a coach. It's like the last play that you have left in your playbook is to blame it or pin it on someone else when your power play goes 2 for 46. To me, it's an eye test thing. It is. And look, I tweeted the video last week or a few days ago. I thought it was so well done on our Daily Face-Off Live show to show you how casual the Devils were with the puck.
They don't shoot.
Their lack of attention to detail is what stands out to me. It feels like a team that's undisciplined, that is lacking maturity, and part of that's due to their age, but they need someone to rein them in. And I'm not saying Lindy Ruff isn't trying, but it's clearly not getting through if you see these same mistakes repeated time after time. So that said, like, let's park that part of it. I do think that there's still a significant roster construction issue with this team in that, one, their goaltending is not helped. When you have both Lindy Ruff and Jack Hughes and other players make public statements saying, man, it'd be great if we could get some more saves. If they're saying that publicly with a microphone in front of them, just imagine what they're feeling and then imagine what they're saying behind closed doors. The Devils' goaltending hasn't been good enough throughout the entirety of Tom Fitzgerald's tenure. Fact. They're now, so he took over in 2020, February or January of 2020. And this is season 5. This would be the 3rd season out of 5 that they finish in the bottom 2 in the league in save percentage. Last year, they had a great year with Vitek Vanacek in the regular season. They finished 11th, and then he totally had his confidence shattered in the playoffs and hasn't been right since. We know the Mackenzie Blackwood situation. He was trending towards being one of the top goalies in the league. That hasn't happened. So the goaltending part, no bueno. But then there's also, it's a chicken and the egg thing too. Is it all the goaltending, or is it some of the issues that they've had on defense where you say goodbye to Damon Severson, you say goodbye to Ryan Graves, fine. You're asking huge things from Luke Hughes and Simone Nemetz, but the problem is then Dougie Hamilton tears his pec muscle and Jonas Siegenthaler misses 5 weeks of action. You can't take 4 defensemen out of one lineup from last year when you win a round and then think that you're going to somehow withstand that and there's not going to be any issues. And, oh, by the way, we didn't even talk about all the time that Jack Hughes has missed and the fact that even since he's been back, hasn't really looked up to snuff, up to his usual standard. So I think the Devils have a lot going on. I think it's tough to sift through. My guess would be that because there are roster construction issues and having a pretty good sense of what Tom Fitzgerald is and how he acts, he's probably putting some of the onus on himself and saying, let me see if I can make a move first before I have to go down this path and change the coach so that I know that at least I put the best team on the ice in front of him to give him an opportunity to win. And I don't know that he's done that yet.
Well, it's just interesting to hear this whole goaltending part of this conversation because, you know, I've kind of argued with everyone all year about the fact that goaltending, you got to pay your goalie, you got to get a goalie. And I've gotten a lot of pushback this year from everybody across all the platforms about how goaltending isn't this major thing anymore. And you can get away with a couple of mid-level goaltenders and, you know, this and that. And now we're talking about the Devils and all we talk about is goaltending and they need to get a goalie and they've never had a goalie. So like that whole argument that like, you don't need a goalie and you don't have to pay a goalie, it's clearly not working in New Jersey.
Well, I would agree. What's the old line from Pat Burns? Goaltending is 70% of the game. Unless you don't have it, then it's 100% or whatever that line is from before Jonny was born. I mean, it's true. How do you think the Kings feel about their goaltending situation right now? They made the boldest bet in the league, spending $2.5 million total on Cam Talbot and Phoenix Copley. Copley's now back in the minors. He's been replaced by big save Dave Riddick,
right? Yeah.
They're as shocked as anyone. The Kings had lost 100% complete and total trust in David Riddick in training camp. The fact that he's not only factoring into their season, but is 7-4-2 with a .911 save percentage since January 1st is bonkers. And right. Cam Talbot, he's been through a wild swing this season. He started the year 14-7-3 with a .925, earning him a trip to the All-Star weekend. And since 2024, since the new year, he's turned into a pumpkin. He didn't get his first win in 2024 until last week, and he's got an .887 save percentage.
And now they're on the verge of missing the playoffs.
Well, no, David Riddick has somehow kept them in it.
Yeah, but
And they're going to make the
not a
playoffs.
lock.
They're a 97% shot to make the playoffs.
They'll make the playoffs. They'll again. You see
But
this now.
Here's my point. The Kings build up this great roster, right? There's question marks now after PL Dubois trade, but you look at their forward group and you say, yeah, I'm thinking of a finger right now. They build up this great forward group, and they
just get Jonny off the screen. He's such an idiot.
But they've bet that now on these two goalies that now because of them, and no offense to Cam Talbot, but no one's looking at the Kings in the West and taking them seriously.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to stay with the goaltending conversation and ask you one more question about goalies in particular.
Because that's my story today on dailyfaceoff.com, taking a deep dive on the goalie market, which is the only reason I knew all these numbers off the top of my head.
I've been getting a lot. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter. Both, the Flyers had a couple of national TV games over the weekend. Okay. Sam Merson plays great the first game against the Rangers, and then Cal Pettersson has to play on the second part of the back-to-back. Cal Pettersson doesn't look like a guy who can play in the NHL anymore, or right now, or maybe,
never again.
Yeah. That was really piss poor goaltending in that game. I mean, one bad goal after another. Hard to watch, actually, and give the Flyers credit for fighting back. And I've had a number of people tweet at me and say to me, and we've had comments, the Flyers need to go out and bring in a better backup goaltender. And my initial thought to that, Frank, is the Flyers do not need to add anything right now. The Flyers should not even consider adding, whether you give Sandstrom a call up who hasn't played that well in the American League, or you just realize, like, even though we love to push for the playoffs, it's not the goal here right now. It really isn't. I think that would be insane. But is that something that's being talked about or considered in Philadelphia, Frank? Or is it just like how I kind of feel about it?
You mean in terms of goaltending or the overall picture?
I'm really talking goaltending. I don't think overall that's even a question. But I'm just talking after what happened with Cal Pettersson on that back-to-back. Are they feeling like they need to do something to have at least somebody who can not let up 6 or 7 goals on 22 shots?
Nope. That's not something that they're thinking about or will act on. They have 3 Russian goalies that are coming that they're incredibly high on. And they feel like because they've allocated a lot of draft capital to picking goalies, that they're in really good shape moving forward. And it's not for this year, although they had kind of planned, I think, for the possibility that Carter Hart might exit the team at some point. There's a reason why they started the year with 3 goalies, and Sam Erson has sort of been certainly a pleasant surprise. But they're not going to act on doing something to close that gap. Cal Pettersson was supposed to be that guy that could be that third goalie, fill in insurance. And at this point, if you're really serious about trying to stack up some points, Felix Sandstrom would be the guy that I would look at. Not that his numbers are much better in the AHL, but at least he gives your team a shot in the arm in terms of some confidence. But I think the Flyers are a fascinating overall deadline team because they've got a really split dynamic in their own marketplace right now. There's a group of fans that are saying, no matter what happens this season, whether we get into the playoffs or not, you need to maximize your return for Sean Walker and Nick Seeler and whoever else that you can move off of this team.
Well, what is that, Frank? Can I ask you, though, what does maximizing a return for those types of players even really look like? I mean, I don't know.
I think you're looking at a second-round pick for each of them.
Okay.
That's the ceiling.
But let's take a step back, though, and not Jonny doesn't like my hand gestures, but let's take
that one was hilarious.
Let's take a step back and look at where the Flyers were when they made that trade involving Pettersson and getting Sean Walker, which, by the way, I don't think they got enough to take on that level of salary from the Kings and Cal Pettersson. But they were totally 2 cap dumps. Sean Walker was a healthy scratch for the Kings last year in the playoffs. To then now turn around and say, hey, you know what? A second round pick isn't good enough for us because we're in this playoff chase. I think that would signal that you're losing sight of the big picture. And I know what that would mean to that locker room to take him out of the mix. I know what it would say to some hardcore loyalist fans who are like, this team is tracking to be a playoff team for the first time in a while. This season has been such a surprise. Why would you ruin it? You have to stay true to what your plan is and the long view, which is stockpiling as many picks and assets as you possibly can. You don't know what you might use them for if you're looking for potential trade capital. And you also don't know what you might be able to pick up in the draft that could be a much bigger game changer down the road than any number of more weeks of Sean Walker, however long it lasts, likely just 2 in the playoffs. Right. And let me take it a step further. Sean Walker, I believe, is looking for something like 4 years times $5 million. Would you pay Sean Walker that kind of money? Would you even pay him 4 times 4?
Probably not.
So given that you're probably not going to sign him at those numbers, why? And for a rebuilding team, why would you? Why wouldn't you go and take the pick?
I would take second round picks for those guys all day long, Frank. And look, and Drysdale gets hurt in the last 36 hours too, and so you're subtracting another right shot defenseman out of that lineup. The Capitals are playing well and creeping. But listen, I agree. I don't think the Flyers making the playoffs as much as I'll lose a bet to Jonny, which I'll be fine with. But I don't think that's the goal or should be the goal for them. It can't be.
Whatever the outcome of this season is should be irrelevant to me. Yeah, like you should be making roster decisions right now, totally agnostic and putting a blindfold on as to what the standings are today because they're rather irrelevant. John
Chan in the chat is asking, is Konechny an untouchable on this Flyers team, Frank?
I think he's as close to it as you can get. I think they're really looking forward to engaging in more substantive discussions with Konechny and his camp this summer when he's eligible to sign a deal. I think they're going to get a real good sense of the framework and what that looks like. And I think he's one of those sort of heart and soul players of this team that you probably want on the other end of this rebuild, wherever that's going, even if he is around 30 years old by the time that happens. I don't think he's going anywhere.
Frank, Ken Mizrahi, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right in the chat, is like basically in tune with the way I was thinking before. You talked about interesting teams at the deadline, the Flyers being one of them, but 2 teams I'm curious about right now with how they've been shaking up lately is the Washington Capitals, who I've given zero respect to all year long. I haven't taken them serious since day 1 of the season. And then the Buffalo Sabres, who, pretty much have been out of things all year long, but, they've started to put some wins together and maybe, the desperation of that city to make the playoffs, maybe they are buyers of the deadline. What are you doing if you are those 2 teams right now? Washington obviously is completely different than Buffalo because Buffalo hasn't been in the playoffs. I think the longest drought in all 4 major sports history, right? They're 13 years without the playoffs. So are you trying to show your fan base that you're still, not giving up on the season and want to try to take a shot at the playoffs if you're Buffalo? And then if you're the Caps, what are you doing if Ovi's now scoring goals and you're winning some games?
I don't think, again, you can get lost in a 10-day or 2-week period of time. The Sabres need serious surgery. They need a big boost this offseason to really be taken seriously. They've had some young players that have taken a step back that they need to ask questions why and who's going to be part of that core. The Caps, to me, are just a team that I don't know. They're definitely not going to be adding, but where are they heading? Give me what the plan is. And that's one thing that I think has been missing. It's been like, well, let's try and stay a little bit competitive and let's try and kind of hang in the race just because we've got Alex Ovechkin chasing this goal scoring record, which is phenomenal. And he's certainly well back on the path to getting there. And I wouldn't be shocked if he actually hits 30 goals before this season is all said and done, which is crazy to believe. He was at, I think, 8 at the All-Star break. But what's the long-term outlook for the Caps? It feels like more pain. And the only thing I really know about this year, which isn't a bad thing at all for the Caps, is that I think I've learned that Spencer Carberry is a really good coach.
Well, I played for him, and I can tell you he is. It was only 2 games, but man, he knows how to inspire a locker room. Honestly, he left a huge impression on me in 48 hours of my life during
Where was that?
It was in South Carolina. It was during a conditioning stint, coming off of a torn. I had surgery with Dr. Myers in Philadelphia. I rehabbed. I came back. The team was going on all-star break, so I went down to South Carolina to play 2 games for Carbs. And honestly, I would freaking play for that guy any level, any team, anytime. He is unbelievable. Like, I was thrilled when he got an opportunity to go be a head coach, because I really think he's going to be a guy that gets to work in this league as a head coach for a very long time. He has that it factor and that presence that you can't necessarily describe verbally. You have to be in the room and kind of see it and feel it. So I'm always pulling for a guy like that, Frank.
That's the only thing I've learned this season about the Caps. Spencer Carberry is a good
coach. Charlie Lindgren.
I think an under the radar, interesting deadline edition. All the teams want Charlie Lindgren with that contract.
All right, Frank. Well, look, we're not going to hold you too long. I want to ask you one more question, and then I don't know if Jonny maybe wants to get a little dating advice from you before we go off the air today. But a story that's
what did you say?
I said, don't ask me.
A story that has been circulating a little bit, Frank, not player or trade related, is the Winnipeg Jets and the situation going on there with their season tickets and their attendance. And we've seen this market, fail before. They came back with a bang, and season tickets and the building being full and this and that. And now we're kind of starting to go the wrong way with the Winnipeg Jets. So much has been made about this whole disaster that we call the Arizona Coyotes. I almost just called them the Phoenix Coyotes. But where are we headed with this whole Winnipeg Jets thing? I mean, I can't imagine a Canadian franchise could fail again. But there's noise, Frank. So I'm curious what's real, what's not, and what to make of it.
Whew. Well, this is my completely unvarnished and honest take. I think it's much ado about nothing. And what I mean by that is I think it's really, I understand what the Jets are trying to do. They're trying to cajole fans back to Winnipeg to buy tickets. Gary Bettman, the commissioner, will be in Winnipeg tonight and apparently may even address the fans about part of this. So they're sounding the alarm bells, but I think there's been a confluence of events that have, I think, put the Jets in this spot, and much of it is their own doing. They were competitive for a while, and then they had a team that was pretty unlikable for a while, and it wasn't based on media, but based on what appeared to be kind of the same thing time after time. And they've committed significant resources to keeping Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck, and that team will probably continue to be competitive for a while. They acknowledge that they didn't really do a good job selling. They almost stopped selling because they didn't need to. And their corporate support was way low because, let's be honest, there isn't a ton of corporate support in Winnipeg. So fans that had bought tickets, a lot of people had teamed up to buy tickets. They weren't splitting off packages. So it was like, hey, me and my buddy over here, we're going to go in on a full season package. Well, now they've made it really hard technology wise to share your tickets. Apparently that's been one of the big complaints from fans. So there's those things happening on one side that I think part of it is just cyclical. The team being, near the top of the standings, playing better, they're going to come back, and they'll especially come back as the season goes on and the games get more important. But this is the part now that most people don't say out loud that I'm going to. which is it really feels like the Jets are crying poor when they don't really have any reason to. And one is because they purchased the franchise for $170 million, which is now valued at $700 million. And that's probably really light because I don't think anyone gets in the door to owning an NHL franchise without putting up $1 billion. So in what will be 15 years time, your franchise will have 10x'd in value. And this is the next part that people don't really say out loud when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets, which is their owners, Mark Chipman, who's been one of the big voices behind here. He's got a huge say in this. He's wealthy. But the other partner in this is David Thompson, who is not just the richest Canadian at $61 billion, but is also the 24th richest person in the entire world. I'd be happy if there were only 23 people richer than me in my own zip code, let alone the entire world. So whatever losses the Jets may or may not be having on a year-to-year basis, writing checks to cover their, what they need to pay their bills. First off, it shouldn't be an issue because of franchise value, and really you're just writing a check to yourself. And second, this is not even a rounding error to David Thompson. So why is this such a big alarming thing? Even if it came down to pure charity, wouldn't they just keep the team there based off of the rounding issues with David Thompson? I don't know.
I mean,
listen, that was a really long-winded way of saying, like, why are we talking about this?
Well, because
that was long-winded.
Well, listen, it's being talked about, and we do have, we have someone in the chat right now, Chef Richard, who comes into the show all the time, comments all the time. He's a Winnipegger, and he says that the ticket prices have become ridiculous. The economy in Winnipeg isn't great. People really can't afford it. He also said that he plans to, or he said, I think I might go to that in response to you talking about Gary Bettman addressing the fans. So that'll be cool. One of our listeners will get to be in attendance to hear that, and we'll hopefully have him reporting back to us tomorrow in the chat. I'm sure it'll be all over social media as well. But
it is a small town, and it is like the fact that they've supported this team as well and as long as they have, I think is really impressive. I just don't believe the idea that they could lose this team again. It seems incredibly far-fetched, and I don't really care how big of a check they're writing, because in Florida, pick another place where teams are, the LA Kings lose money every single year. They're going to lose, I think, $24 million this year. Does anyone hear Phil Anschutz, the owner of the Kings, complaining? No, because it's about the long-term view and the franchise value that really matters. They've killed it. They've absolutely killed it in Winnipeg. So what's the complaint?
And they're good right now. Okay. They're buzzing right now. So maybe the playoff run, who knows? That could spark something, right?
People will definitely show up in the playoffs.
Yeah,
no doubt.
The whiteout.
It's a small building. I've played in it before. It's not a huge building. It'll be sold out in the playoffs. It'll be so good.
It'll be sold out down the stretch. Stop.
Great place to broadcast as well, because the vantage, you're hot. You're not so high, but you're kind of closer to the ice. It's actually one of my favorite buildings to call a game in, for sure.
I don't really have anything else for Frank today. I know you got a busy one. You're doing Leafs Morning Take coming up here, right, Frank? A busy day for you on this.
Yeah, good. It was only 48 minutes with you guys.
Well, we appreciate your time as always. I know next week when we have you on, it'll be a little bit busier as it's trade deadline week. So I'm sure.
Is that next week already? Wow.
A week from Friday.
10 days away.
All right. Before you go, Frank, give us one wild prediction. Give us one thing that we're not thinking about or talking about that you think could happen that might be more on the wild side and kind of throw people a little bit off.
We swear we won't clip it and post it on Twitter.
We will exactly.
I don't have anything. I really don't have anything bold. I think this is a mostly uncompelling deadline, if we're being honest. I know I'm doing a great job of selling my show next Friday.
I was going to say 4 hours. We'll be on the air 4 hours next week on the DFO YouTube page.
Frank, just say that Crosby could be getting traded. That's all you need to do.
He's gonna hang up if you say stupid shit, Johnny. Is Jacob Markstrom gonna move?
I don't think so.
Okay. I love all the people, by the way, that tweet at you, Frank. Nick Alberga included. Machine Gun Yanmark announced the Oilers trade. Like people, it's like, Frank, don't you make the trade?
I don't make the news. I just report.
I thought you actually called the GM and said, "Hey, make this move now."
Yeah, please help save me. Although I do say occasionally, please help me. Please give me something. Please tell me you have something. And they laugh.
All right, Frank. Well,
my bold prediction. Okay, I'll give you one.
All right, good.
The New York Rangers will be one of the busiest teams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Johnny loves to hear that. I hope they
you should have said that because I'll be blowing up your text.
I wonder if they're going to move their 22-year-old 100-point winger.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but maybe they move another high-pick winger.
Yeah. All right, Frank. Well, look.
Frank, you should not have said that because now I'm going to be texting you nonstop in the next 10 days.
All right, I'll put it on Do Not Disturb.